Number 12. Glenmorangie Original. Glenmorangie Original has become one of those bottles that almost sells itself. It sits prominently on shelves across the United States, instantly recognizable with its tall, elegant design. For many drinkers, it serves as a first introduction to single malt Scotch, and that familiarity has turned it into a default choice. Not because it stands out, but because it feels safe. The distillery behind it deserves credit. Founded in 1843, Glenmorangie operates the tallest stills in Scotland, producing a lighter and more delicate spirit. That should create something distinctive. But the final product tells a different story. Once the whiskey leaves the stills, it's bottled at 40% ABV, chill-filtered, and refined to remove any sharp edges. The result is a profile built to avoid strong reactions. Vanilla, citrus, and soft peach notes come through, but they fade quickly, leaving very little behind. At $35 to $40, it's not a bad purchase, but it's not a memorable one either. It delivers exactly what's expected, and nothing more. The frustrating part is knowing the same distillery produces far more expressive bottles, yet this remains the most widely chosen. Number 11. Aberlour 12. Aberlour 12 presents itself as a reliable Speyside single malt with deep roots going back to 1826. On the surface, it delivers exactly what many expect from the region. Notes of honey, apple, and gentle cherry sweetness create a smooth and approachable profile that's easy to enjoy. At around $30 to $35, it seems like a solid mid-range option. But the real issue isn't the flavor. It's the difference between what's sold and what could be sold. In the United States, Aberlour 12 is typically bottled at 40% ABV, chill-filtered, and enhanced with caramel coloring. It's designed to be consistent and accessible. Meanwhile, in parts of Europe, a different version of the same whiskey exists. That version is bottled at 48% ABV, without chill filtration and with natural color. That means richer texture, fuller flavor, and a more authentic experience. The contrast raises an uncomfortable question about market expectations. The decision to offer a lower-strength version in the US suggests that producers believe most buyers won't notice or won't prioritize those differences. The whiskey itself remains enjoyable, but the awareness of what's missing changes how it's perceived. It becomes less about quality and more about what consumers are being conditioned to accept. Number 10. Bowmore 12. 200 words. Bowmore is a name that carries real history. Founded in 1779 on the island of Islay, it stands as one of Scotland's oldest licensed distilleries. It still uses traditional floor maltings, where barley is turned by hand over peat smoke, a process that should create a whiskey full of character and identity. And at times, it does. Some bottles of Bowmore 12 deliver exactly what Islay is known for. There's light smoke, a touch of honey, hints of citrus, and a balanced finish that feels satisfying. In those moments, it reminds drinkers why the region is so respected. But the experience isn't consistent. Other bottles introduce flavors that feel completely out of place. Notes described as sulfur, soap, or waxy medicinal tones can take over, lingering longer than they should. These aren't rare complaints either. They've been discussed for years among whiskey drinkers. At $45 to $55, that inconsistency becomes hard to ignore. A bottle at that price should feel reliable, not uncertain. Even with reported improvements after Beam Suntory's acquisition, the hesitation remains. There are other Islay whiskeys in the same range that deliver bold, dependable profiles every time. That's what makes Bowmore 12 stand out, not for what it does right, but for how unpredictable it can be. Number 9. Laphroaig Select. 200 words. Laphroaig has built its reputation on intensity. It's known for bold peat, medicinal notes, seaweed, and a profile that immediately divides opinion. That strong identity is what made the distillery stand out in the first place. So when Laphroaig Select enters the picture as a softer, more approachable option, it raises questions. On paper, it sounds promising. The whiskey is matured and finished in a variety of casks, including bourbon, Oloroso sherry, Pedro Jimenez, and virgin American oak. That combination suggests depth and complexity. In reality, the result feels blurred. Instead of distinct layers, the flavors merge into something muted. The sharp, defining edges of Laphroaig are softened to the point where the identity becomes harder to recognize. What was once bold and memorable turns into something far more neutral. The way it was created adds another layer to the story. This expression was reportedly shaped by feedback from a community voting process. While that sounds engaging, it leans more toward product development than traditional craftsmanship. What makes the choice even more puzzling is the pricing. Lafroig 10 sits nearby for about $10 more and delivers the full, unmistakable character the brand is known for. Choosing Select often means settling for a quieter version of something far more expressive. Number 8. The Singleton 12. The Singleton 12 might be one of the most carefully engineered products on this list. Not engineered for flavor, but engineered for consistency and mass appeal. The name Singleton suggests a single, unified identity. But the reality is much more complicated. Depending on where it's sold, the Singleton 12 comes from entirely different distilleries. In Europe, it's Dufftown. In Asia, it's Glen Ord. In the United States, it's Glendulin. 3 different distilleries, 3 different production processes, 1 shared label. That alone should raise questions. The American version delivers exactly what the brand promises: light fruit, mild honey, and a finish that disappears quickly. It's smooth, it's easy to drink. It's also incredibly forgettable. At $30 to $35, it's positioned as an entry-level single malt. And technically, it does its job. It introduces people to the category without overwhelming them. But it also removes everything that makes single malt whiskey interesting in the first place. Every edge is rounded off. Every challenging note is stripped away. The result feels like it was designed by a committee trying to avoid complaints, rather than create something distinctive. And that's not speculation. That's exactly how large spirits companies often operate. Focus groups, market testing, flavor profiles built to appeal to the widest possible audience. The outcome is predictable. A whiskey that is almost interesting, almost memorable, and almost worth the price. Almost. Number 7. Johnnie Walker Double Black. Johnnie Walker is one of the most recognizable names in whiskey. And within that lineup, Black Label has long been considered a solid, dependable choice. Then came Double Black. Marketed as a smokier, more intense version of Black Label, it was introduced as a kind of upgrade for those looking to take the next step. It's typically priced about $10 higher, landing somewhere between $35 and $45. At first, that seems reasonable. More smoke, more depth, a more premium experience. But here's where things start to unravel. The added smokiness in Double Black comes from Islay distilleries, many of which are owned by the same parent company, Diageo. That includes names like Keola and Lagavulin. And those distilleries sell their own single malts at similar price points. So instead of buying a blended whiskey that borrows a bit of that character, there's the option to go straight to the source and experience the real thing. That raises an uncomfortable question. Why pay extra for a blend that imitates something that can be purchased directly? Double Black isn't a bad whiskey. It has more body than Red Label. It introduces a smokier profile. It's perfectly drinkable. But its entire existence feels unnecessary. It occupies a space that didn't need to exist, created by the same company that profits from every step of the ladder. And that ladder suddenly looks a lot less like a natural progression and a lot more like a carefully constructed sales funnel. Sudden. Number 6. Dalwhinnie. 15. 200 words. Dalwhinnie. 15 is often introduced with one defining word: gentle. It's described as smooth, approachable, and easy to drink, which makes it appealing to a wide audience. On the surface, that sounds like a positive trait, especially for those easing into single malt Scotch. But the word gentle starts to take on a different meaning when looked at more closely. The distillery itself sits over 3,000 feet above sea level in the Scottish Highlands, facing cold temperatures and dramatic seasonal shifts. Those conditions should shape a whiskey with bold character and a strong sense of place. Instead, the profile leans heavily towards simplicity. Honey, soft vanilla, and a clean finish dominate the experience. It's pleasant and technically sound, but it doesn't leave much of an impression. At $55 to $65, expectations rise beyond just being smooth. There's an assumption that the whiskey will offer depth, texture, and something distinctive. Dalwhinnie 15 hints at those qualities, but never fully delivers. The way it's marketed reinforces this approach. Gentle is positioned as refined, but in practice, it often feels like complexity has been dialed down. For those looking for something easy, it works. For those expecting more, it feels incomplete. Number 5. Highland Park 12. 200 words. Highland Park 12 once held a reputation that didn't require explanation. It was known for balance, offering a mix of light smoke, subtle sweetness, and a faint coastal influence that felt complete. It appealed to both newcomers and experienced drinkers without trying too hard. That reputation was built on real craftsmanship. Founded in 1798 on the Orkney Islands, the distillery still uses traditional floor maltings and heather-smoked barley, giving it a distinctive character few others can replicate. That uniqueness used to come through clearly in the whiskey. The 12-year expression once delivered a well-rounded profile, combining sherry notes, gentle peat, and a touch of salinity in a way that felt cohesive and memorable. Then the direction shifted. Around 2017, the branding moved toward a more dramatic, Viking-inspired identity. The packaging became louder and more visually striking, and the price increased to around $45 to $55. At the same time, the whiskey itself began to feel different. The richness seemed lighter, the smoke less pronounced, and the finish shorter than before. It didn't become a bad whiskey, but it lost some of what made it stand out. Now there's a noticeable gap between the bold image on the outside and the more restrained experience inside. Number 4. The Balvenie 12 Doublewood. The Balvenie 12 Doublewood is one of those bottles that people trust. It has history, credibility, and a reputation built over decades. The distillery emphasizes traditional methods, including on-site core bridge and floor maltings, along with the long tenure of malt master David Stewart. Those are real credentials, and they matter. The Doublewood itself played a major role in popularizing cask finishing, where whiskey is matured in one type of barrel and then finished in another. That innovation helped shape modern Scotch in a significant way. But history doesn't guarantee present-day value. Today, the Doublewood sits in the $55 to $65 range and delivers a profile that's undeniably pleasant. Honey, vanilla, a bit of cinnamon, light oak, smooth from start to finish, and that's exactly where the issue starts to show. It's smooth to the point of being undemanding, easy to drink, but not especially engaging. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's also nothing pushing it beyond expectations. Meanwhile, the market around it has evolved. Other distilleries are offering higher proof bottlings, natural color and non-chill filtered expressions at similar or even lower prices. These details matter because they directly affect texture, depth, and overall experience. The Doublewood, by comparison, feels like it hasn't kept up. It hasn't needed to. Brand loyalty is powerful. Once a bottle earns trust, people keep coming back to it, without questioning whether it's still delivering the same value. And that's what makes this one stand out. Not because it's bad, but because it's coasting. Number 3. Oban 14. Oban 14 comes from one of the smallest distilleries in Scotland, located in a coastal town that literally grew around it. The setting is beautiful, and the whiskey itself has a distinctive character that blends Highland sweetness with maritime influence. There's genuine quality here: orange peel, sea salt, a touch of smoke, and a dry finish that gives it a recognizable identity. It's a good whiskey. That part isn't up for debate. The issue is the price. At $75 to $85, Oban 14 sits in a range where expectations change. At that level, people aren't just looking for good. They're looking for something that feels worth the cost. And this is where things get complicated. Part of the pricing comes from the distillery's limited output. Being smaller means less supply, and less supply often gets positioned as exclusivity. That exclusivity then gets translated into higher prices. But scarcity doesn't automatically equal value. Year after year, the price has crept upward, while the whiskey itself hasn't changed in a way that justifies that increase. The liquid hasn't become dramatically better. The experience hasn't evolved. The perception has, and that perception is doing a lot of heavy lifting. There are other coastal Highland whiskeys that offer similar, and sometimes more complex profiles at lower prices. That comparison starts to highlight the gap between what's being paid and what's being received. Oban 14 isn't failing because of its flavor. It's failing because of its positioning. Number 2. Royal Salute 21. Royal Salute 21 is a masterclass in presentation. Everything about it is designed to feel luxurious. The porcelain bottle, crafted in rich colors and detailed design, immediately stands out on any shelf. It looks expensive. It feels expensive. And that's exactly the point. Created in 1953 to commemorate the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, the brand leans heavily into its royal heritage. The name itself references the 21-gun salute, a symbol of honor and prestige. The story is compelling. The packaging is stunning, but the whiskey inside tells a very different story. At $130 to $170, expectations are high. This is positioned as a premium aged blend, matured for at least 21 years. On paper, that sounds impressive. In the glass, it's surprisingly restrained. Soft vanilla, light fruit, gentle oak, and a mild spice on the finish. It's smooth, easy to drink, and completely inoffensive. And that's the issue. At that price, smoothness alone isn't enough. There should be depth, texture, a sense that the whiskey has something to say. Instead, it feels like the liquid is playing a supporting role to the packaging. There's also a detail that's hard to ignore. It's bottled at 40% ABV. For a whiskey of this age and price, that's the minimum legal strength. And it shows. The body feels thinner than expected. The flavors don't carry the weight that a 21-year-old whiskey should. What makes this even more interesting is how it's typically purchased. Royal Salute is rarely bought as a personal choice. It's usually a gift, something chosen by someone who wants to impress, often without knowing much about whiskey. And that's exactly where the brand thrives. Because when the focus is on appearance, the contents become secondary. Number 1. Dalmore King Alexander III. This is where everything comes together. Dalmore King Alexander III is one of the most visually striking bottles in the entire whiskey world. The heavy glass, the silver stag emblem, the presentation box, it all signals luxury before the bottle is even opened. It looks like a $200 experience. And that's exactly what it costs. But once the focus shifts from the packaging to the whiskey itself, the gap becomes impossible to ignore. This is a no-age statement whiskey that's finished in multiple types of casks, including bourbon, Oloroso sherry, Madeira, port, Marsala, and Cabernet Sauvignon barrels. On paper, that sounds complex, layered, sophisticated. In practice, it becomes muddled. The flavors compete instead of complementing each other. Chocolate, orange, dried fruit, wine tannins. They all show up, but none of them fully develop. There's no clear direction, no defining character. It feels busy, not refined. And then there are the technical details. It's bottled at 40% ABV, chill filtered, colored with caramel to achieve that deep, rich appearance. At $160 to $200, those choices stand out. Because at that price, many distilleries are offering higher proof, natural color, and non-chill filtered whiskeys that deliver far more texture and authenticity. Here, the emphasis is clearly elsewhere. The design is doing the talking, the story is doing the selling, and the whiskey is left trying to justify a price that the presentation already set. That disconnect is what puts Dalmore King Alexander III at the top of this list, not because it's undrinkable, but because it represents the widest gap between perception and reality. If this breakdown changed the way these bottles are viewed, there's a lot more to explore when it comes to finding better value and better whiskey. Subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more deep dives into what's really behind the labels.